All right. Hello, Dr. Fuhrman. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
And I'm excited for everyone to join on live now as well as we go over Mr. Fuhrman's new book, Fast Food Genocide. And I'm excited about this. I've just read this and it was an amazing book, I have to say. And I have to say, it was something that was really easy to read. But what I was most excited about is that there's incredible doctors like you in the world that have our actual health and longevity of humanity at heart. And I think that came through perfectly with everything that you backed up all of your insights with. So I wanted to say thank you firstly for writing such an incredible book, and I'm excited to chat more about it today.
Me too, and I'm really excited and passionate about it too, because as you can imagine, it's probably 10 years of work going into a book like that. You know, looking at 100, maybe 10,000 studies and picking out the 700 we want to utilize and making it flow into a book. And I think it's really one of my books that was most interesting and interesting to read, and even for people who aren't interested in their own health, can just understand the historical aspects and how this is a fascinating information, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about how obviously food is the fuel for health and longevity, and we know that on a physical level, but you also talk about how it impacts our DNA and addictions and social interactions and academic performance and behaviors. And I think that's so interesting to go into today. So while people are all coming on now live, I can see loads of people are joining in. If you have questions throughout, don't forget you can pop them in the box. We're going to have a chat first, and then we'll get to the questions later, and we'll do the best we can to get to that. So, Dr. Fuhrman, I want to start off with something, and I want to quote you on this, that you mentioned quite early on in your book. And you said, diets are the primary driver for our health and longevity, and the medical community is doing us a disservice when it entices us to pop pills in answer to all that ails us. Now, I thought this was a pretty powerful claim coming from a doctor.
Well, you can imagine that the major causes of death in the modern world are diseases of nutritional ignorance. And they're not just obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, but all the common cancers are mostly related to what we're eating. And dementia is related to what we're eating, and strokes, putting people in nursing homes. So we're talking here about tremendous amount of suffering, including mental illness. 1 in every 5 Americans are mentally ill. And major depression is the leading cause of disability in the world, which is related to what you eat more than any other parameter. So we're talking here about, and people generally recognize that the incorrect food can cause obesity and diabetes and heart disease, but they don't see it causing mental illness. For some reason, they think it could destroy your kidney and your heart, but it doesn't destroy your brain. And actually, the reality is your brain is the most fragile organ to be damaged by unhealthy nutritional practices, affecting your learning ability, your creativity, your emotional outlook and happiness, your ability to quickly anger and get heated easily. And of course, we're talking here about losing brain cells and losing your intellectual capacity and your memory as we age. They're directly related to what we eat. So the tentacles of unhealthy nutritional practices, eating frankenfoods, eating fast foods, eating commercial baked goods, eating sweets, and all the things and barbecue and fried foods and all the things that we do wrong in the modern world. People don't see how it affects the way our cognition, our intellect, and our ability to take care of ourselves and be happy. Our happiness is related to what we eat, and people don't understand this. So in direct answer to your question, though, we go to doctors, and instead of telling us what we're doing wrong to prevent the cause, we're given a pill. The pill perpetuates the underlying problem. If you have high blood pressure, you go to the doctor, get a pill, you eat the same diet that caused the problem to begin with, which means that the disease of the blood vessels continue to advance unchecked, because the pill didn't stop the destruction of the endothelium. They didn't reduce the rate at which you're losing vascular elasticity. They didn't reduce the rate at which you're storing plaque on the inner wall of your blood vessels. In other words, the damage continues because now you think you're protected because the blood pressure looks lower. When you're giving a diabetic medication, you're lowering your blood glucose, but you're allowing the body to still become overweight because the medications cause weight gain. And weight gain causes more insulin resistance. And a lot of these medications cause the failing beta cells in the pancreas to work harder, putting out more insulin, which makes them poop out even faster, which increases the morbidity and mortality from diabetes as a result of taking these medications. So what I'm saying right now, that what doctors do with their prescription is not worthless, it's actually harmful. It's worse than worthless. Look at the scam of putting in stents in people, which accelerates the risk of death and makes it so now if they eat a healthy diet, they're not going to get the full benefit because they have a foreign body in their heart. And they don't live longer because they put a stent in. They're living a shorter lifespan now because they put a stent in. So much of what the medical profession does is harmful. And we have an opportunity where people come to you sick when they're looking for advice, they're vulnerable, and you had an opportunity to have a major effect in their life and save lives. And in 95% of the time, doctors don't take advantage of that opportunity. They just write a prescription, and the person leaves with the same habits that caused them to arrive there to begin with.
And it's so powerful now that there's, more information, especially like this book that you're putting out there, so people can start to educate themselves on that. But, something that I found super interesting within the book is when you spoke about the DNA and how, you mentioned that an unhealthy diet conspires to unfavorably transform our DNA. So fake food actually alters us both mentally and physically and affects the way we act and undermines our health. And so is this to say that, disease that we think is passed down in generations like, diabetes and cancer and dementia and things like that, do we actually have control over that?
We do have control in that we could really reduce heart attack rates and cancer rates by 100-fold if people ate a diet of a nutritional excellence, of what I call a nutritarian diet. But the point that you were discussing in the book and that we'll discuss right now is that fast food has infiltrated the American diet, so it's the major source of calories people eat today. And that causes destruction to our sperm and our eggs, as well as our own body cells. So we damage the DNA in our own cells. At the same time, even before you conceive a child, the foods you ate through the first 30 years of your life, let's say you get pregnant when you're 30 years old. Well, the unhealthy foods you ate in the first 30 years could have damaged the DNA in your eggs. And therefore, you can have a child with autism, or a child with learning disabilities, or a child with increased risk of allergies, or a child with childhood cancer, brain tumors, or in other words, you can give children a start in life that they didn't deserve as a diet the parents ate before the person was even conceived. And what I'm saying right now, it's not just a diet during pregnancy that affects the health of your children. It's also the unhealthy foods that you ate before the sperm ever met the egg. And so what I'm saying now is that the term fast food genocide also means that we're causing damage to future generations that's going to be magnified, and is becoming magnified by our present food practices. And it's very tragic when a person had no role in their bad health. It's just because what their parents ate screwed them up,
Wow. And is that to do with, allergies that a lot of babies are getting born with and stuff these days as well?
Yes, it does. And it also has to do with women taking folic acid because they're told to take folic acid because they don't eat green vegetables. The word folate comes from the term foliage, which means green, which foliage is greens and things that grow outside, which are all high in folate, which are necessary for normal development of the baby, neural tube development, the spinal cord. So instead of telling our society that we're eating a diet that's dangerously low in foliage, instead of telling that, we give them a synthetic petroleum product called folic acid, which doesn't biologically work like folate does, and it increases the risk of breast cancer in the woman taking the pill, and it increases the risk of autism and disease in the child whose mother took the folic acid instead of eating the green vegetables like she should have been eating. So we have a whole convoluted way of thinking in the modern world. We get high blood pressure. Instead of exercising and eating right, we take a pill. We have high cholesterol. Instead of lowering our cholesterol through eating right, we take a pill, which makes us gain weight and become more diabetic. And then the pill can damage the heart, and the pill can also increase the risk of breast cancer. So we take a pill, and so people can continue to abuse their body. And the same thing is going on with young women in the pregnancy field. Instead of teaching a woman to eat right and not have birth defects, we give her a pill so she doesn't have to eat right. So now she can continue to eat the foods that cause childhood cancer, and we can have an exploding rate of childhood cancer instead of teaching women to eat right, which will prevent birth defects and childhood cancer. It's kind of a little complicated, but it's just so foreign for people. They don't think this way. They just do what doctors tell them to do, and they don't understand there's something wrong with the human body, that we need to take a pill, a folic acid pill, to have a normal baby. something the way the humans were designed, that we need to be relying on modern, on petroleum technology to have a normal, without not have birth defects? The whole thing is just insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the most important points I came across in your book was when you mentioned that, and I completely agree, and I think so many people could agree today as well, is that you mentioned there's so much information out there, and there's so many studies that you could back yourself up with depending on what you want to believe or who you're listening to. So it's really confusing for people in the public now to actually fathom or actually understand what is truth and what we should be doing, because there's so many for and against topics, right? And so let's discuss that, because I think that's a really good one to discuss for people listening today.
That's right, because most of the rules and diets people follow are based on other people's opinions because of hypotheses that they put forth. And the hypothesis might be based on a limited amount of thinking or some short-term study that showed people lost some weight. And I'm saying that that's not good enough to give credence to people's opinion. Things have important and valuable credence only when we have long-term studies, not short-term studies. The studies have to go on for decades, and they have to look at hard endpoints like heart attack rates, cancer rates, or death. The best endpoint is death, an age in which a person dies. And so I can put you on a diet of Twinkies or cookies, and you might get sick of eating Twinkies all day, so you'll eat less calories, you lose a little weight, your diabetes will improve. But if I followed you for 2 or 3 decades, and I followed large numbers of people, thousands of people on the Twinkie diet for decades, they'd have increased risk of cancer, increased risk of dementia, they'd have an early life death. It's the same thing we do with gastric bypass surgery. It looks better temporarily in the short term, but we don't follow these people for decades compared to people on, the point is that we can't give much credence to these short-term studies. And we have lots of good long-term studies that deal with these questions. And if we use those predominantly as our drivers of influence, then we see that there's not much controversy here. Not much controversy means that a diet rich in a huge variety of colorful plants extends human lifespan. And the more variety of phytochemicals and the amount of phytochemicals, both the quantity and the diversity of phytochemicals, extends human lifespan. And so there's no controversy here that a diet higher in processed foods, high glycemic carbohydrates like white bread and sugar and maple syrup and honey and white rice, that these foods in the long term shorten lifespan compared to whole plants that haven't been processed or made high glycemic. And the same thing is true with animal products. Diets richer in animal products, as you go to 20% to 30% of calories like we do mostly in this country, we see at every 2% increase in animal product consumption, heart attack rates also go up a few percent, and cancer rates also go up a few percent with every increase in consumption of both animal products in the diet over a certain level. So now we have these diets of all descriptions out there. Some people telling us not to eat high glycemic carbohydrates, eat a lot of animal products, and other people telling us wipe out the animal products, but white rice and white potato and sugar and maple syrup and honey are okay. That's okay. So we have, and the reality is that nutritional scientists the world over know that we have to reduce high glycemic carbohydrates, processed foods, and animal products simultaneously, and substitute more beans and nuts and vegetables and greens and onions and mushrooms and berries and fruit. And so we really, there's not that much, how should I say, controversies left. We know what we should do, and now we got to have our populations do it.
And so if people know what we should be doing, like I'm sure there's not one person I could walk past on the street and say, fruit and vegetable good for you, and they would say no, right? So if people know this information, then what's going on for people when you know this information, yet you go to the gym and then on the way home you stop into KFC on the way home? What's going on for people in their life when that's happening for them on a regular basis?
Right, exactly. And thanks for that question, because that's what the book talks about. It talks about how these foods are designed to be addicting, and that people can't control their caloric intake. And it takes over a part of the brain that controls your ability to think logically. So they can't even think logically about the issues we're talking about. They can't even think scientifically because their primitive brain, which fuels their emotional behavior, is driving their food choices. So it's your emotions and your feelings that are driving your food choices, and not the scientific you, not the logical you. And you got to have what you want, and you don't care about your health. This primitive brain doesn't care about long term. It's like a little baby crying out with wah, wah, wah. They want their bottle, they want their ice cream, they want what they want right now. And food is designed that way. They design these foods so the calories enter the bloodstream very rapidly. And the faster the calories and the larger number of calories enter the bloodstream almost instantaneously, in proportion to the rush of calories in the bloodstream, you get dopamine stimulation and dopamine release in the brain, which makes you crave these foods and almost like you can't live without them. Also, when your diet is relatively low in nutrients and you build up these metabolic waste products, and we can talk about how the rapid absorption of calories doesn't just fuel addictive behaviors and addictive thinking, but it fuels disease. It makes your body it fuels fat storage, and it makes cancers grow in the body when the calories rush in so rapidly. So we can talk about that, but what I'm talking about now is that when you imbibe in these foods that are fried or that are made of white flour and sugar, that are designed to be, the calories are absorbed so rapidly, then when you try not to eat them for a few hours, you feel fatigued and you feel shaky, and you even can feel anxiety coming on without the food. And then when you go back to eat that food, you feel better. And because the food makes you feel better, you think you were hungry, or you think that food diet is good for you or something, because it's making you feel better. But the reality is that the body most effectively cleans, detoxifies, self-repairs, and heals on a biochemical level when it's in the non-feeding state. It's when you're not digesting food, when your stomach is empty, that your body can repair more. And that stage of the digestive cycle is called the catabolic phase. And I always say that the longer you live in the catabolic phase, the longer you live. What that means is the more space you put between meals. If you finish your dinner earlier and start your breakfast later, if you go to 13 to 15 hours with not eating at night, you're going to live a lot longer. But people who are eating fast food and processed foods can't even think about doing that because they'd feel too uncomfortable not eating food for so many hours. Because when you hit the catabolic phase, you're not digesting, the body starts to detoxify. And the body is so toxic, they start to feel shaky and weak and headachy and stomach cramping and anxiety. So they got to get up in the middle of the night and have some food. They got to eat before they go to bed at night. They got to eat in the middle of the night. They got to keep putting food in their body all the time. So what I'm saying right now is the low quality of a person's diet makes them overeat calories because they're too uncomfortable not overeating because they don't feel well enough when they're not digesting food. So it drives people to become obese. And right now we have more than 85% of Americans are now overweight or obese in this country. And I know that people will say 85%. I thought it was 65 or 70% because the US government put out a recent data being at 70% as being overweight or obese, but they used above 25 as the demarcation line for what they consider overweight. And all long-lived societies and all blue zones and all centenarians all have BMIs below 23, not above 20, below 25. So we lose the correct demarcation line of 23, not 25. Then we classify about 85% of Americans being overweight, not 70%. Do you follow me?
Yeah. And so you refer to that in your book as toxic hunger. What is the relation? What's the difference, or what is toxic hunger versus emotional hunger first? Because emotional hunger comes up for a lot of people, I think. So is that the same thing, or is that different?
No, there are differences because the emotional hunger is also akin to saying recreational eating, because people eat because they, instead of having social connectivity, relationships, intellectual pursuits and interests, they use food as their source of entertainment and recreation. And they can use food as an emotional support as well, instead of having true emotional support. Instead of healing their lives and dealing with their stresses and taking care of their life in a way that uses their full brain, they've suppressed the activity of their brain and kept themselves in a fog or a funk with food, so they don't have to deal with their lives. And it interferes with people's ability to think logically. What I'm saying right now is that commercial baked goods and fast foods are linked to major depression in a dose-dependent manner, so that when you eat commercial baked goods like pasta, like donuts, like cookies, like bagels, 2 or more times a week, your risk of developing major depression increases, lifetime risk increases more than 50%. That's just from 2 servings a week. It goes up in a dose-dependent manner up from there. But the point I'm making right now is that even when you don't develop depression, even the people who aren't depressed, those foods and those low nutrient calories still put a negative impact on their emotional outlook of life, even when they don't qualify to be diagnosed as fully major depression. So it makes them unhappy. It keeps them with brain fog. It makes them negative and pessimistic. It makes them focus on their own narrow world around themselves, and it interferes with them interacting socially in a favorable way with other people. So even though it doesn't cause major depression, and don't forget, 1 in 5 Americans are mentally ill today. So we're talking about a major effect from these foods on the human brain. But I'm saying even the 4 out of 5 that aren't mentally ill are having their emotions affected negatively by the foods they're eating, and interfere with their creativity, their ability to succeed in their jobs, in school, in their creative pursuits, and in their desire to have happiness is still being interfered with by those foods they're eating. But the primitive brain doesn't want to go there. The primitive brain just wants to have its cocaine, have its opiates, have its cigarettes. And the primitive brain lies to you because you'll now think thoughts that are irrational and self-delusional just to protect your cocaine habit, just to protect your soda habit, just to protect your pizza habit, just to protect your French fry habit. You'll think irrational thoughts to deny that there's linked to breast cancer, to deny that they're having a negative effect on you. You'll think any thought because the primitive brain wants to continue its addictive nature. And the foods are designed like that to hook you in, because they put, as you know, corn syrup into the French fry batter. They put salt and sugar and MSG in the batter so you can't taste it. They put sugar and corn syrup into the hamburger meats. They put salt into the soda. They fry everything in oil. They mix oils before they fry it to increase the caloric density so it comes to the bloodstream faster. It's designed by food scientists to make people want to crave that food and eat more of it, because it's competitive out there. Each fast food restaurant and each junk food manufacturer wants to develop its own clientele of people that love that food and want to keep eating it. And they're not doing, but unfortunately we see that the owners of these companies and the executives in these fast food industries, they die very, very young ages. They're dead in their 50s and 60s, just like the linebackers on football teams are, which are some of the shortest lived people in America, are people who get to be 250 to 300 pounds, and they're working on making millions of dollars on football teams. But then, of course, they're dead really young because they ate so that rich food to get that big. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. And so how do we break this habit? Like, if this is like, we're addicted to this, right? How can people make changes? And I know you mentioned intermittent fasting before is a really powerful way to obviously give your body the chance to detox properly from this toxic behavior and toxic food that's coming to your body. But how do you get to that point? How do you make the change?
Right. What I'm saying right now, if you try not to eat for 13 to 15 hours at night, it's too uncomfortable for people who aren't eating healthy. And we're not suggesting people do that. We're suggesting that you flood your body with nutrients first. In other words, what do you do first? Do you have the smoker go on a fast? No, have the smoker has to cut back on cigarettes first. You know what I mean? So the first thing to do is really to flood your body with high nutrient foods. And that's really makes it so much easier for your brain to work better, to make good decisions. And it makes it easier to deal with your food addiction. And it makes it easier to deal with the stresses of your life if your brain has the nutrients it needs to perform. So the first thing you do is to eat a large salad every day. The first thing you do is make a big pot of vegetable bean soup on the weekend and put mushrooms and onions and scallions and and green kale and turnip greens and bok choy. In other words, to flood the body. And I have the acronym, as you know, GBOMBS, GBOMBS, which stands for those foods that have very powerful anti-cancer effects as determined in scientific studies. So we know that there are some foods, natural plant foods, that have more powerful longevity effects and protection against cancer than other plant foods. And they've been well documented to do so. An example are the ITCs, the symphony of isothiocyanates that are present in cruciferous green vegetables. And those ITCs aren't formed when you heat the vegetable, so it's really very, very protective for people's longevity to eat some raw or lightly cooked broccoli and kale and bok choy and Brussels sprouts. So to eat some cruciferous vegetables each day. It's very, very protective to our brain and our longevity eat some flax seeds or chia seeds every day, because because flax seeds have like 50 times the amount of lignans compared to broccoli stems and pineapple. In other words, they're very, very rich in these longevity promoting nutrients. So the point is that if we eat the G-BOMBs, which stands for greens and beans and onions or scallions and mushrooms and berries and seeds, if we try to flood the body with these high nutrient plant foods, then it makes it easier to cut back on the junk and to go without eating. So the body is dying for these nutrients to be able to have its tissues function normally, and we have to get people to learn how to make healthy food taste good, know how to fit it into their schedule, start to eat healthy food, then quitting the junk food becomes so much easier.
Absolutely amazing. And we actually have someone, I can't say their name, but they're from Vancouver, who said the G-BOMBs have actually helped them to be able to release or reduce the emotional hunger that they experience. So it proves that it works. So thanks, guys. And yes, I can see all your questions come through. Thank you. We just wanted to get through some questions first, and then we'll head over to you guys who have some questions live. So I'll start off with a question from Anna, Dr. Fuhrman, and she says, she had a question on curing diabetes on a whole food diet. She said, doesn't it just go into remission, since it would return if you were to go back to a standard diet? And also, when you reverse diabetes by eating a whole food diet, is it possible to still suffer the effects of diabetes that can't be measured, like cell rejuvenation and the body's ability to ward off cancer?
Well, thank you for that question. And it's really interesting to talk about that, because I don't think people know that when people are overweight and have diabetes, they have more anger and more depression and more propensity for crime and drug abuse as well. That diabetes doesn't just destroy your kidney, it destroys your brain cells, and it lowers your intelligence and your ability to make good decisions about your life. So I'm absolutely, how should I say, insistent that people become non-diabetic, that they don't take drugs and continue being diabetic, that they do whatever it takes to get rid of their diabetes. And that means they have to become slim, they have to exercise, and they have to eat a diet, which I call a nutritarian diet, because it's a diet designed around whole plant foods, but it's also designed with lower glycemic plant foods. The major carbohydrates come from low glycemic carbohydrates like squashes and beans, which have more resistant starches in them than let's say grains do. So we designed the diet to reverse the diabetes, to lose weight, and people within a month can become non-diabetic. And a study I put out showed that 9 out of 10 diabetics who were diabetic for many, many years became non-diabetic with not needing any medication within 6 months. So the goal for the diabetes is to get rid of it, not to control it, because you lower your blood sugars down, you're still overweight, you're still eating poorly. It's very important for a diabetic to eat an ideal diet and to get rid of it. Now you could say, well, what about a person who's 40 pounds overweight? If they eat right to lose weight, are they still overweight? No, they're not still overweight, they lost the weight. Well, don't they have a propensity to become overweight? Should they eat bad again? Of course. Their genetic type is such that if they eat bad foods, they're going to become overweight again. But they're still not overweight if they're eating right. So a diabetic's the same way. Just because they have a maybe genetic predisposition or they have the inclination to become diabetic, should they become 40 pounds overweight, doesn't mean we call them diabetic once they're eating right and have lost the weight. So I'm not sure about that question. That's a semantical question. And it doesn't matter what the semantics are, what you call a person. What matters is the person keeps themselves in great health, has their sugars in normal range, their hemoglobin A1C stays low, and they keep themselves eating healthy for the rest of their life and don't take chances with your health. That's what's most important, because the brain damage is reversible to a degree, and the damage to your body is reversible to a large degree, and the opportunity is for this person to have a normal lifespan and to prevent themselves from getting cancer, because diabetes and the extra body weight increases the risk of cancer as well. So we want to get rid of the diabetes so they don't have to incur those significant and excess amount of risk.
Absolutely, good answer. Now I have another question here, and they mentioned, so I can't see names on some of you guys here, but they mentioned the ketogenic diet. And instead of eating red meat, which they say seems that it will cause cancer, can plant-based fats like avocado and walnuts be substituted for the meat and still have the potential to work off existing cancer cells in the body?
Oh, and by the way, just with that last question about diabetes, I didn't mention, I just wanted to mention, I have a book called The End of Diabetes. So that person with the interest in diabetes should get that book and study it and become non-diabetic. And those questions will be answered for her in intense detail, as well as why you shouldn't be relying on medication. But so that I want her to get that book. So the next question is about a ketogenic diet. And here's the thing. Remember we talked earlier today about people having a hypothesis, and they want to follow whatever hypothesis that sounds good. They want to eat meat, they'll grab that paleo hypothesis because they want to eat a lot of meat. They want to eat a lot of oil, they'll grab a ketogenic hypothesis. They'll grab on something where this nutritional guru explained to them what the foods that they want to eat are okay for them. That's just not a good way to look at things. You really have to look at long-term studies. And so we're talking here about a diet that's rich in a huge variety of plants. Now, how does a person, and we know that animal products produce too much, the animal protein, not just the fat, produces an excessive amount of an IGF-1 response in the body, and also it fuels the growth of bacteria that promote TMAO, which trimethylamine oxide, which inflames the blood vessels. So a diet rich in animal products is dangerous. So the paleo diet hypothesis is no longer even a viable hypothesis. It's been thoroughly disproven. There shouldn't be any paleo advocates out there. It's an irresponsible way to advocate people eat. It's been tested over the years in studies that have gone on for more than 20 or 30 years, and it's shown to shorten lifespan considerably. So now people come up with this new idea. It's a ketogenic diet, and it's almost in the same field. So they're saying, well, we're going to eat a lot of coconut oil. We've got a lot of oils. Instead of eating meat, we're going to eat a lot of fat. We'll get rid of the protein down. But they have to recognize that oil is calorically concentrated. It rushes into the bloodstream very rapidly. It does not contain fiber or phytochemicals. And it's the nutritional quality of your diet that affect how long you're going to live more than anything else. So let me make this one thing clear. The most important factor that determines how slow you age your body and how long you're going to live, as determined and proven in medical studies, and I'm using the word proven in the scientific sense here to mean it's reproducible in every study tested, and it's done in many studies all over the world with different scientists testing the same thing, and that's having a diet that's moderately caloric reduced in an environment of micronutrient richness and micronutrient adequacy. That means all the micronutrients humans need in an environment of moderate caloric restriction. To do that, we have to eat foods that are rich in nutrients and somewhat not take in excess calories. So these ketogenic diets, the ketogenic causes acid in the body, in the bloodstream, which may age us over time. They've not been shown to reduce the risks of cancers long-term, though we may find out in the future that some particular cancers may respond to a ketogenic diet and some cancers may not. But we have no studies on that to come to those conclusions yet. So people coming to those conclusions is just ridiculous at this point. But nevertheless, we know that those diets are relatively high in calories and they're high in low nutrient calories, like oils, mostly like olive oils and coconut oils and avocados. They're too high in those. They're rich in calories, and they're not nutrition. They're not micronutrient rich because they're avoiding berries, and they're trying to avoid things with carbohydrates. And some of these colorful plant foods like tomatoes and berries and beans have intense polyphenol and micronutrient intense content of phytochemicals that have been shown to have longevity promoting effect, anti-cancer effects, and longevity promoting effects. In other words, with the amount of science we know at present, we already know the features of a nutritarian diet make it the most lifespan promoting diet, not a ketogenic diet. There's not studies that support it anywhere near that you can, with any comparison, or even a sufficient amount of long-term studies that show that would be true, that would be valid. It's just a hypothesis. And maybe it's better than the American diet, but just because it's better than the American diet and has better short-term outcomes doesn't mean it's a good diet. It's just like people say the Mediterranean diet, isn't that a good diet? Well, just because the Mediterranean diet is better than the American diet, and we have 40% of people dying of heart attacks and strokes, and they have 35%, that's no good 35%. That should be 1% or 0% or 3%, not 35% dying of heart attacks and strokes. Just because it's better than the American diet doesn't make it the best diet. That's just ridiculous thinking. When you know that we have to analyze every particular every particular food eaten in a particular diet style and say, would that diet be better with that food or without? Is it better to not eat the pizza? Is it better not eat the white flour pasta? Is maybe a walnut better than walnut oil? Which is better? We can't just assume because one diet style is better than, somewhat comparatively better than another. It's an ideal way to eat. So again, it's just not it might be better than the way people are eating, but it's still not a great diet.
Absolutely. And just on that note as well, like, what about if people have, let's say, dabbled in the whole food diet, the plant-based diet, and decide that it's not for them, and they need to go back to a paleo or whatever it is? What's going on for those people?
Well, isn't that ridiculous? In other words, let's say you're eating a diet, and I'm recommending here that when you eat a lot of volume of high nutrient foods, it naturally suppresses the appetite and makes it possible for people to better control their caloric drive. And their apostat in their brain doesn't desire as many calories when your diet's rich in fiber and nutrients. So it naturally suppresses appetite and helps you not overeating. Now, let's say you're on a healthy vegan diet, like a nutritarian diet, and you're not eating any animal products at all, and you don't thrive. We have to discern the reason for the person not thriving, because we know vegan diets can cause depression. And in some studies, people on vegan diets develop more depression than people eating meat-based diets. And one of the reasons is because a lot of the population doesn't make EPA or DHA genetically, doesn't have the conversion enzymes that make those hormones, that make those brain supportive nutrients as much as other people do. So this person maybe isn't thriving because they need more zinc, they need more DHA, they need more protein, whatever the problem is. We have to ascertain what the problem is, and we don't want people on vegan diets to become depressed. So it's very important that the person approaching a vegan diet looks at what their diet might be missing, because what if they had eaten fish or seafood or seaweed? They'd have more iodine, they'd have more zinc, they'd have more EPA and DHA, they'd have more, so there's they have B12. There are certain limitations of a vegan diet that makes it so it has to be supplemented properly to not get people in trouble. Now, let's say you're a rare person who needs a little bit of animal products, whose ability to digest protein might be hindered in some way due to the way your prior history or your digestive capacity. That doesn't mean you go to a paleo diet. That doesn't mean you go from the other extreme. It means you titrate with you try to fix the diet with a little more zinc, a little more DHA, obviously, with a little bit of extra protein, and beneficially and preferably plant proteins like hemp protein, hemp seeds, or pea protein, or more Mediterranean pine nuts, which are rich in protein, or change the ratio of green vegetables and beans to your carbohydrates to get more protein in your diet. And then if you have to add a little animal products, add a minimal amount of animal products. The smallest amounts, 5%, 8%, something that's going to still be safe and have you be thriving. You don't go from eating 0 to eating 80%. You find some low amount that'll make you feel that it will be best for you. Because as your animal product diets go up, we know that those paleo diets are almost all animal product diets, and they're exceedingly dangerous. They cut short life by a tremendous number of years. So I can't figure out how people can't thrive on a vegan diet, jump to a high-protein paleo diet. Why don't they jump to a diet with just a little bit of animal products into it to feel better, not the high animal product diet as recommended by the paleo people? So the whole thing doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have another question from Denise, and she mentions, she says, how do you feel about smoothies?
Well, I don't recommend people eat fruit smoothies, but I think smoothies are a great way to get green vegetables into you if you're using a little bit of fruit. So it's not great to make the fruit like dates and pineapple and bananas and just drinking your liquid fruit. I'd rather you eat the fruit. But if you're using some berries or an apple or half a banana and it's making some vegetables in there and putting broccoli and kale and peas and nuts and seeds in there, then it's good. So I think that smoothies are good, but you got to watch the glycemic effect of the smoothie.
Okay, and there's another question that relates to that on pomegranate juice that's said to be good against cancer. Is it high in sugar? Is it safe?
Right. Well, the healthiest way to eat pomegranate, obviously, is to eat a whole real pomegranate, right? So I mean the mixing with the saliva and also the eating of the pomegranate areoles, or those pomegranate kernels, are healthier than the juice that's been squeezed. And the juice that you squeeze fresh from a pomegranate is still healthier than the juice that you buy that's pasteurized in a store from the commercial pomegranate. So yes, there's still some benefit there's still some beneficial phytochemicals in a commercial pomegranate juice, but I'd still recommend the real pomegranates whenever you can get them. What I do is when I can buy pomegranates that are in season and they look good and they're at a good price, I'll buy a lot of them, and I'll bang the backs of the pomegranate and take the seeds out, and I'll store the seeds in 20 different plastic bags and put them in my freezer so I can use them later on, a month or two later, or during the winter time when there's no fresh pomegranates in season. That's the best way to do it.
Awesome. And Catherine asked, how long would it take to reverse a fatty liver with the nutritarian lifestyle?
Nutritarian. Well, your fatty liver it depends on how overweight the person is. Some people that are, most people who are obese and they're more than 100 pounds overweight lose about 100 pounds the first year on this diet. But usually their fatty liver is gone when they've lost the first 50 pounds. But if a person has fatty liver and they're only 30 pounds overweight, it can be reversed in 2 or 3 months. So it can be reversed very, very quickly. People know when they have gastric bypass surgery, they very often will drop 50 pounds in the first 6 months. And I see people drop sometimes 20 pounds in the first 6 weeks. And then the next month they dropped another 10. So they've done 30 pounds in 2.5 months. And at that point, their problems, their diabetes is gone, their fatty liver is gone. So it's relatively quickly.
Cool. And what about, Kimberly says, I have MS and osteoporosis. How can I strengthen my bones without medicine?
Well, medicines don't strengthen your bones. They reduce the rate at which you're losing bone mass. But in any case, there's risk associated with medication like atrial fibrillation and necrosis of the femoral head. There's all kinds of dangers, but the way to strengthen bones is by lifting heavy weights and by tapping type exercises, like exercises that involved some impact, even mild impact. So impact might be walking, it might be jogging in place, it might be doing jumping jacks or a magic jump rope, jumping in place, making a jumping rope so even on a soft surface like a carpeted surface, a rubber mat, or outside on the grass or the dirt, walking and jogging in place and jumping in place is probably the most effective way. And then the next most effective way is wearing a weight vest and actually picking up heavy weights, or using, like taking a desk, standing next to the desk, and even though you're not going to lift the desk off the ground, pulling up against the desk as if you're trying to lift it. So exercise which thickens and strengthens muscles also thickens and strengthens bones. So that, in combination with eating right and getting sufficient protein and calcium and vitamin D, some of these people are vitamin D deficient. If they should strive for that vitamin D level between 30 and 50. And they should use supplements to achieve a level of at least 30 if they have osteoporosis. So, I do have, through drfuhrman.com, I have a service which I supply to people all over the world where they can join as a member at a level to ask me questions and my medical staff questions, to devise diet styles and to talk to them about their medical conditions so I can tweak the recommendations specifically to help them with medical problems. So I do that for people all over the world. So we have people with, mild kidney failure or multiple sclerosis, or people with ulcerative colitis, or some conditions where they want the diet to be adjusted to their particular needs. So I think that in your case, though, a nutritarian diet has effectively reversed multiple sclerosis in many, many people. And it's an effective therapeutic modality for both multiple sclerosis and osteoporosis if combined with exercise.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. And then on another question on supplements, what do you think of the highly touted supplement beta-glucan?
Well, beta-glucans you get from eating mushrooms and other, and healthy foods. So I don't think that it may have some value to take astragalus, which has beta-glucan, and to take mixed mushroom extracts, but it has to be in conjunction with eating a healthy diet and eating real food, because you don't rely on the supplement for it, because the supplements because don't forget, there's never going to be one phytochemical or one substance that's going to be the answer. It's always taking in hundreds of different beneficial phytochemicals and substances, and you get that by having the variety of foods that we're recommending in a person's diet.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. And I think we have time for one more question, and I've left this one till last because it kind of can go into a whole other topic, because she asks about fasting. And without going for another hour, she says, Dr. Fuhrman's 46-day fast, why was it that long? And did it help your knee heal? And then she asked if she were to start a fast prior and she was just eating vegan junk food like pizza, non-dairy, fried foods, what's your thoughts on fasting when you've just been eating that?
Number one, I don't think people should fast unless they're healthy. And if they're eating junk food like that, they shouldn't even be considered fasting, because that's just stupid. They're already nutritionally deficient, and a fast is going to make them more nutritionally deficient. And I did a 46-day water fast when I was 19 years old because I was an athlete, I was young, and I was influenced by the doctors who told me to fast, and they almost killed me. It ruined my competitive skating career, so I was never strong enough. I didn't get back again in time for the Olympics and get my strength back. And I almost died from fasting that long. So I did it because I was too young to know any better at that point in my life, that would be very dangerous to fast that long. And I'm lucky I'm alive from fasting that long. So I got bad advice, is why I fasted that long, and I'm not recommending anybody else fast that long, to be clear about that. And fasting is a lifespan enhancing tool that also can be used as a therapeutic modality to reverse asthma and help people with lupus, but it has to be used properly and judiciously and conservatively. We're talking about having people fast who are good enough health to undergo the fast. They've eaten healthy long enough before the fast. They're supervised during the fast for a limited period of time, and then they're fed properly after the fast as well. You don't just take a person who's nutritionally deficient and put them on a fast.
Amazing. I hope that answers your questions, guys. Thanks so much for joining us live and sending questions. And like Dr. Fuhrman said on his website, there's so many frequently asked questions. But more than that, there's the book itself that has incredible information, frequently asked questions in the back, a whole bunch of recipes that you can do to start to make different choices in the kitchen. And I just wanted to say thanks again, Dr. Fuhrman, for joining me and creating such an incredible book. I highly recommend it. If you're watching this live right now, you can scroll down to the bottom and grab your copy. And you can also share this video if you think more people need to hear about this, which is what the whole point is, to get that information out there. So thanks again, Dr. Fuhrman. And where can we go to find out more about you and people can access more information?
Well, they can get the book anywhere, on Amazon or anywhere. And I'm just so excited about the book because it's such a new book for me, and so many years of research went into it. Really, but they can come to learn more about me and my work. Come to drfuhrman.com, which is obviously drfuhrman.com.
Beautiful. And is there anything that you want to leave us with today, or anything you want to share before we leave on your book, or anything else?
Well, the thing I want to share is that don't be satisfied with not feeling well. Don't be satisfied with not being the 100% person you could be, and don't be satisfied with taking drugs for medical conditions. Let's seek out the cause and use nutritional excellence to get completely. Don't have high blood pressure, get rid of it. Don't have high cholesterol, get rid of it. Don't have diabetes, get rid of it. Don't have headaches and migraines and lupus and psoriasis, let's have people recognize that nutritional excellence is the most powerful health intervention, not drugs.
Such a powerful message. And I'm going to end with what I always like to say, is that you don't know how good you can feel until you can feel it. So we don't need to be feeling this way. In fact, people don't even know how bad they actually are feeling until they make a change. So give it a go, purchase the book, and thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate your time. Thanks everybody as well.
Bye-bye.